Though your heart is aching, smile, even though it's breaking. When there are clouds in the sky, you'll get by if you smile. Through your fear and sorrow, smile, and maybe tomorrow you'll find that life is still worthwhile if you just just smile.
Hello everyone, JesterGio here and welcome back to the channel. You know how it goes, new season, new content, new changes. Persona 5 is back in Identity 5 by the time I'm writing this, so I hope you get something out of the crossover. The Goatman also got his animations leaked to the public alongside his voice lines and sounds. I won't show them here, though, since they aren't public yet. However, I'm sure you'll be able to find them with enough searching. Finally, a large list of really good balance changes have been added into the game and I've been having a lot of fun with the changed survivors. In fact, I had so much fun that I wanted to talk about the survivors that were changed. Weeping Clown won the recent poll, so he will be the first character I will be talking about. Do not worry, I will get around to talking about the others in the poll. I'm just doing Weeping Clown first. While Weeping Clown was always a fine survivor on his own, I felt like he left a lot to be desired and buffs would really help fix him. Now that the changes are finally in the game, we can now see if these buffs helped or if they didn't do anything. Before getting into that, though, we should probably talk about what he actually does before going into the changes. So, without further ado, let's look at what Weeping Clown does and go from there.
Welcome to the show, come take a seat. Let's watch together, come cry with me. I always do this again and again. I give them my trust, I call them my friends.
Man, it's been a while since I've actually done one of these, hasn't it? Since I've been doing a lot of new character videos, these sections have been reserved to the First Look series. However, since Weeping Clown is not a new character, I'll go over his kit. As usual, we will be going over his up-to-date kit, meaning all of the changes made will be mentioned. Starting off with his unique item, Weeping Clown starts the match with 3 rockets, each of which have a 16-second cooldown per use. Upon use, Weeping Clown will summon a rocket, which will propel him forward for about 10 seconds. Over the course of those 10 seconds, the rocket will start to lose a bit of its speed and Weeping Clown will have access to a one-time boost. This boost can be found on your interact button and pressing it will cause the rocket to dash forward at the cost of being unable to turn. Additionally, you have a companion button that you can toggle on and off at will. If you run past a teammate with this button on during rocket dash, that teammate will get on the rocket with you. Unlike Weeping Clown, teammates holding onto the rocket cannot let go until the time expires. Weeping Clown will get off the rocket himself if his rocket time expires, he runs into a wall for a second, or he manually dismounts by pressing the item button again. Whenever the rocket collides with a wall, it will explode on impact. This explosion has a 6-meter radius to it and it has certain effects depending on who is in the radius. If a survivor is in the explosion range, they will be given a 25% speed boost for 2.5 seconds. If the hunter is in the 6-meter radius of the explosion, they will be astonished and move 50% slower for 2.5 seconds. If the hunter is within 3 meters of the explosion, however, they will instead be stunned for 2.5 seconds. Finally, Weeping Clown has all thumbs, which decreases his decoding speed by 10%. And with that, we have covered everything that is in Weeping Clown's kit, a very simple kit I might add. I'll be honest, I'm a very big fan of how they were able to incorporate Smiley's design into Weeping's kit, and I think the devs did a very good job. That said, we're here to talk about the changes and how they help Weeping Clown. But first, let's take a little history lesson and see all the changes that were made to Weeping Clown.
I bought the ticket, that's on me, that's on me. I came to the show, take a seat, take a seat. I bought the ticket, that's on me, that's on me. It's all my fault, I'm lying through my teeth.
On October 27, 2021, Identity V will release the Time of Reunion story event, and, with it, they introduced us to the Identity system. This system was meant to show off a concept that's only really been shown via the lore, which is the fact that certain hunters used to be survivors. More specifically, it allowed netties to create different identities and link them to the same character, such as Alice DeRoss being linked to memory. Orpheus was the first identity survivor to release into the game, with both Novelist and Nightmare coming with the same event. A lot of floodgates opened afterwards, especially with the Go Hunting trailer showing hunter versions of Entomologist and Prospector. Additionally, old lore suggested that certain hunters used to be survivors in the game, such as Seer's letter confirming Lucino was a survivor and the book stating Hell Ember used to be a survivor. Nowadays, the identity system is looked at very negatively because of the plethora of mediocre characters that release under that tag. However, people were really hyped for who would be the next character to get an identity swap, especially with all the already established characters with swap forms. That's why I'm sure it was a shock for a lot of people when it was confirmed that Joker would be getting an identity swap. Not only that, but he was actually the second character ever to have received an identity swap form. While you could look at his lore and come to the idea that he had a survivor form, I'm sure a lot of people just assumed he only had a hunter form, similar to a lot of the characters in this game. Nevertheless, people were excited to see Survivor Joker, especially the people who shipped Joker and Dancer. Then the design was shown off to the public and
Oh my goodness!
Okay, to be fair to the developers, after the shock wore off, I will admit that this is a really good design for Joker. I was initially annoyed at the design because it looked nothing like Smiley Face other than the face and claws. However, it kinda makes sense that he wouldn't look like Smiley Face since Smiley is more based off Sergey rather than Joker. Because of that, I actually now appreciate the direction they went with Weeping Clown's design, especially after seeing the abominations that are his concept art. However, then we go into the test server and, oh my god, I forgot how horrible Weeping Clown was in the test server until rewatching footage. Weeping Clown's rocket was really slow, you had to manually grab a survivor and the button only appears during rocket dash, meaning you could mess up, the turning was awful. And the rocket would just disappear if you didn't manually dismount from the rocket. On top of that, you didn't have the one-time boost with you, so you were extremely vulnerable to hunters like Geisha or Bloody Queen. If you thought Joker was trash before the buffs, he was borderline unplayable in the test server. Fortunately, the devs realized this and decided to make some changes to him. For starters, they realized how stupid it was for the rocket to poof out of existence like the useless shit it is, so they changed it. It now works like it does right now, with Weeping Clown letting go of the rocket for it to explode. This makes it so the rocket isn't completely useless if you mess up and run into a wall, and makes it so you aren't completely punished when you forget to let go. I'm sure a lot of people still manually release the rocket, I do that as well, but it's still a welcome change. They also made it so the companion button is automatic, and that's really all I can say about that. When releasing him onto the live build, they also gave him his one-time boost ability, which drastically helped with his kiting and mobility, let's be honest. They also made it so the companion button was always displayed on screen, which was also a nice change. This became the final result for his release, and while some players were optimistic,
I think he's going to be meta out of the game. Because he's just another forward style character that can kite. Like his kiting ability is like, why do people play forward in tournament?
a lot of the community have come to a unanimous agreement.
The next character in D tier is the new one, which is Weeping Clown. And unfortunately, Weeping Clown is, believe it or not, one of the worst characters NetEase has released in a while.
Weeping as a part of bench warming. Sorry, Weeping as a part of bench warming. Yeah, Weeping is really part of bench warming.
Clown, he's around here. He's a B+ tier. He's not great. He gets distance, which seems good, but he's just slow.
Yeah, Weeping Clown was considered a really bad survivor in the meta, and it's because his rocket was still kinda bad. Its turning was still awful, it wasn't fast enough, the cooldown was too long for what it's worth, and there were other survivors who could do his job way better. That's not to mention the Hunter roster being able to deal with him effectively, which I will go into more later. Weeping Clown got some minor buffs, such as collision being altered or survivors being able to act immediately after letting go of rocket, but they didn't help fix his problems. It isn't until June 2022 and onward where Weeping Clown will get 3 major balance changes that would fix a lot of his problems. First, they increased the speed boost and slowdown/stun time from 2 seconds to 2.5 seconds. It was a small buff, but it was really effective in helping both containment and support. In the next patch, they increased his turning speed alongside the movement speed of the rocket. These two issues were the biggest problems Weeping Clown suffered from at launch, so them addressing it here definitely helped make him feel way better to play as. However, I feel like these changes only got elevated by these recent changes made to his kit. First, they made it so Joker gets on and off of his rocket much faster now. This is yet another small buff that goes a long way to buff his containment and support. I mean, this Ithaca had mischievous and I still managed to get the rocket save off thanks to the buff. Next, they lowered the cooldown of rocket from 20 seconds to 16 seconds, thank God. 20 seconds is too long for an ability that can be outclassed by other mobility options, so lowering it was a smart move. Finally, they buffed the speed of rocket even more, making it so it moves even faster than before, but slowly loses speed over time before finally moving at the same speed it did before the buffs. They said this change is exclusive to carrying other teammates in the promotion, but all the testing in the book confirms it's an overall speed buff. This change is massive since, combined with the original speed buff, finally makes his rocket dash feel worth it rather than feeling sluggish. You can actually use it to transition and stay ahead of the Hunter now, and the changes made to his support make him feel like a really versatile survivor. Overall, I am really happy with all the changes made to Weeping Clown and the effort the devs made to try and make him viable. I personally feel they managed to pull it off as well, as Weeping Clown feels like a genuinely viable survivor in the meta, and I can potentially see him played in tourney as a later round survivor. Why do I think that? Well, let's go over the good and bad of this character and see for ourselves.
Excuse me, miss, you dropped your clown certificate. You ain't the clown, you're the whole dang circus. If you think you can give them another chance.
If I'm being honest, it'll be really hard to talk about all the positives about Weeping Clown without mentioning all the negatives. Because of that, I'll actually cover the negatives of Weeping Clown first before interjecting with some positives about him. To start things off, I think the most talked about problem with Weeping Clown that has never went away, even after the buff, has got to be the turning. Weeping Clown's turning is borrowed from Balloon's turning, which is already really stiff in itself. However, unlike Balloon, Joker doesn't have a drift button to help him turn a bit better or make sharper turns. Because of this, Joker isn't viewed as favorably as survivors like Forward or Wildling when it comes to mobility because of his turning, and I do get it. It's really annoying to mess up an item because of the turning not being the best and harder to use compared to an item like Forward's. However, I feel like the turning for Weeping Clown is actually not bad. Obviously, there will be routes you cannot take with the rocket, whereas Forward can make extremely easily with enough practice. I understand how that can be frustrating for a lot of players and can cause people to not want to play him. With that said, once you become adjusted to how Weeping Clown's turning works, it becomes way easier to make turns. In fact, once you're adapted to the turning, you'll come to learn that there are certain turns that are actually possible. Here are some I knew I could make via playing him a bit and getting a better grasp of his ability. However, then there's this turn which I got off complete accident, which is a really huge turn to make. Saving your dash, you can actually get massive distance getting upstairs from this area and can even make the God palette upstairs. I do think a big reason why people aren't able to make these turns and believe it's bad is because they aren't abusing the wall mechanics enough with Rocket. For Smiley and Forward, they will always have a 1-second wall immunity during the first second of their abilities before they can bump into walls. This mechanic is here so they won't immediately mess up their ability and it ends before it even began. This same mechanic is on Weeping Clown's Rocket except, rather than it being for the first second of the ability, it is active at all times. This means you can run into as many walls as you please and, as long as you get off of it before a second, you won't be forced off of Rocket. This mechanic helps make a lot of turns possible and definitely helps a lot of his kiting aspects. So while his turning can be annoying, I don't think it's a problem and I think it only further makes him stand out. Another problem with Weeping Clown I've seen that is a fair argument to make is his interaction with meta hunters. Currently, the strongest hunters in this game are Opera Singer, Ivy, and Anne, with both Opera and Ivy practically destroying Weeping Clown. Opera Singer can catch up to Weeping Clown with no issue and Ivy can just screen Weeping Clown off of Rocket, thus making it useless. With that being said, I don't think Weeping Clown is as bad of a pick against the meta hunters as people say he is. Back then, the reason Weeping Clown was so bad against a lot of the meta hunters was because his rocket moved so slowly and the turning made it impossible to go to areas you want to get to effectively. However, with the speed buffs added in alongside the improved turning, I think Weeping Clown is a solid pick against a lot of hunters. While I have had problems with Opera Singer and I know Ivy will be an issue for him, I've actually done really well as him against hunters I know would counter him. Wax Artist, Ithaca, and even Anne struggled to really catch Weeping Clown, which was something I didn't expect when playing him. Anne was the one who took me by surprise when playing against her because I was 100% expecting her to just destroy Joker in chase. However, I think the big reason as to why that isn't the case is simply because Weeping Clown is amazing at keeping his distance from the hunter. With Ithaca and Wax Artist, his speed and turning allows him to use the terrain to his advantage and prevent himself from getting wax or being in the Tempest. With Anne and the other hunters, his buff speed allows him to keep any distance he had against the hunter, which is really good. Even if Anne screams him off Rocket, as long as you're next to a wall, you can gain the 25% boost from the explosion, thus keeping your distance for a little bit longer. I feel like Weeping Clown is a very vulnerable survivor who can get countered hard if you use Rocket in the open against a lot of meta hunters like Anne, Gamekeeper, Wax, and Ithaca. However, when using the terrain to your advantage and keeping your distance with the hunter, Weeping Clown does stand a really good chance against these type of hunters. Against non-meta hunters, on the other hand, Weeping Clown is just a straight-up menace against. While he obviously won't work on mobility hunters like Wheel, Smiley, or Percy, his rocket dash makes it really hard for a lot of the off-meta hunters to catch up to him. In fact, I think Weeping Clown is by far one of the worst survivors to chase in the early game as a hunter unless you're a meta hunter. In the early game, you don't really have anything to catch up to Weeping Clown unless you are a mobility hunter or a meta hunter with a mobility option. Plus, trying to blink a Weeping Clown is really hard to do because he is able to keep his distance from you. However, his rockets definitely become weaker in the mid-game when you do have presence and are able to knock him off of Rocket more easily because of it. Ithaca has Cyclone that forces him off Rocket, Alva can cut him off with Second Dawn, and Anne's Second Jump with Max Presence to name a few abilities. Despite that, I do think Weeping Clown has an amazing ability that helps in transitioning or tight kiting situations, especially when used well. As for other complaints I have, I think his cooldown is still a bit too long, even with the reduction. It gives you a lot of value, yes, but there are still other abilities in this game who can give you just as much or more value than Rocket that also have a shorter cooldown. Even with characters whose cooldowns are longer than Weeping Clown's, they typically have abilities that grants them even more value in a shorter time than with Weeping Clown. It makes the Rocket feel a lot weaker than it actually is and also causes people to question even playing Weeping Clown over other characters. Another complaint I have on top of Weeping Clown's cooldown problem is the fact that there's no indication that Joker is using or used a Rocket. Why is this so important? 1 name, Cheerleader. Because Weeping Clown has no audio or visual cues to show when he uses Rocket, Cheerleader needs to pray Weeping Clown either pings his cooldown or prays she guesses right. Now, you might be wondering why this is such a big deal since there's a few items that don't warn the team when they're in use as well. While that is true, she is free to use her cooldown refresh on them because they can just use their items during that time, which will immediately refresh the cooldown. Weeping Clown's refresh only happens after he lets go of Rocket, and Rocket has a 10-second timer, the same amount of time the cooldown refresh lasts. That's not to mention that there are times where you won't need to use Rocket at all in a situation, and the fact that there are situations where you need to use the Rocket for the full duration. Because of this, Cheerleader has potentially no synergy with Weeping Clown unless he is smart enough to ping when his item is on cooldown. There's also his Harassment, which is hit or miss because of low terrain. For those of you unaware, a lot of projectile characters can shoot over low terrain, such as Gamekeeper, Batter, and Wax Artist. In fact, almost every projectile ability or ranged ability can go over low terrain or just ignore it in general. However, Weeping Clown's Rocket is one of the few projectile abilities that cannot go over these low terrains. This helps with containment, as he can use literally any obstacle in the game to shoot the rocket into and it'll explode, but it's really bad for support or harassing. Weeping Clown is the only harassers who you need absolutely nothing in the way of your rocket in order to be able to harass, which can be hard in a lot of situations. To compensate for this, however, I feel like Weeping Clown is by far the safest and most unexpected harasser in the game. One of the downsides to playing a harasser is the fact that they typically need to be close to the hunter and their abilities have a range limit to them. This is why harasser is such a risky role to play, as you risk getting caught or downed by the hunter, which can kill the match for the team. However, the rocket has no range limit tied to it, it just keeps going until it collides with an obstacle or the hunter. On top of that, the rocket's speed is increased even further when nobody is riding on top of it. Because of this, you can be standing extremely far away from the hunter and can still pull off balloon rescues without being in the danger zone of the hunter. You can even be outside of Tinnitus range and still get the rescue off if you know when to use Rocket. Your rockets will rescue during balloon animations, meaning you don't have to body block or try and do additional stuns like Anti, Prospector, or Postman have to do. You also stun the hunter a lot longer than other harassment stuns, meaning it gives more time for a survivor to run away or allows you to prep for body blocks. Finally, survivors still get the 25% boost from the explosion, meaning they can get even farther away from the hunter during the stun, buying even more time for the team. Weeping Clown is definitely a very underrated harasser in this game, but I do think he has potential to being a really good harasser for a team. Especially since he's one who has a small decoding debuff and doesn't put himself at risk of being injured. Rocket is also just a really good item in general, in my opinion. It can be used to get to chaired survivors quickly and potentially make it before they reach half health, which is really good. You can also stun the hunter with the rocket, allowing you to safely rescue the survivor when that happens. Rocket can also be used for long distance support, though I must warn you that the rocket will be a bit to the right when you release it. This is the same with Batter, and it's why trying to harass while peeking from the left of obstacles is really hard. You can also stun hunters from behind walls if they are close enough to the wall. Even if you don't land the stun, however, the 50% speed reduction the hunter suffers from is insane and can help you or your teammates gain more distance against the hunter. Finally, his 10% decoding debuff is just nothing thanks to perfect calibrations, so you won't put the team at a detriment if you don't support or contain, unlike Forward or Batter. Overall, I think Weeping Clown is an extremely good character now who has a lot of tricks to help him in the current day meta and who can counter a lot more hunters. I feel like the only true counters for Weeping Clown are Opera and Ivy alongside specialty hunters like Wheel or Smiley, who doesn't have to worry about Rocket, but are also very counterable in other ways. Because of this, I feel Weeping Clown has the potential to be a tourney viable hunter. Specifically to have a safe early game container or harasser in later rounds when you know for sure Opera Singer and Ivy cannot be played. While I believe Weeping Clown is in a good position as of now, I do also think there's still a bit of love the devs can give to him to improve him a bit more. Despite being mostly minor changes, I still want to highlight all the changes they could make to him, so let's look into some possible changes they can add to Weeping Clown.
You can't keep
Based on the experience I've had with Weeping Clown, I've constructed a lot of changes that they could add to him. As usual, these changes will be listed under the minor, major, and extreme sections depending on how strong it might be or how much it reworks his kit. Starting off, I actually have 2 minor changes that they could add to Joker. The first change would be to reduce the cooldown for Rocket Dash. Once again, the current rocket cooldown is just too long and I feel reducing it more wouldn't hurt. Some would say the cooldown should be 10 seconds, but I think a 12 to 14 second cooldown would be just fine. There's really not much to say about this, simple yet effective all around. The other minor change revolved around Cheerleader, which was originally to give Weeping Clown an icon or a sound cue whenever he uses Rocket. This would help remove any of the guessing game Cheerleader needs to do, as it'll allow her to use her refresh after seeing or hearing him use his item. However, the more I thought about it, the more I realized just how bad of an idea this change would be. Going forward with this change would mean also giving the hunter an audio or visual cue for Rocket, which is really bad for harassment. With the exception of Wild Ling, most of the harassers don't have sound cues or icons to show their ability is in use to help their unpredictability. By adding a cue to Rocket, you strip Weeping Clown of that unpredictability, which turns his Rocket from an amazing support tool to a useless one. Because of this, I've settled on a far simpler, yet effective change, which just makes it so the refresh happens when he starts using the Rocket rather than after Rocket ends. Not much else to say, it'll give him the cooldown refresh even if he does the full duration or stalls out the time until he really needs Rocket. As for the major change, they could increase the movement speed survivors her from the explosion to 30% or even 35%. Just like the cooldown, I feel like the speed buff leaves a little to be desired compared to several other speed buffs granted by several talents or survivor items. Adding a small amount of speed won't do much, but it'll really help his support and containment. For the extreme change, I would actually like to suggest a one-time drift that Weeping Clown can do. While I don't think his turning needs to be buffed, I do understand the annoyance that comes with certain areas. The drift won't automatically fix this issue, but it'll definitely make going through kiting areas so much easier. It'll open up a lot more opportunities and routes the Rocket can take without changing his turning, so I feel this is a fair trade. These changes aren't necessary to be added into the game because I feel he's in a really solid place as is. However, I do think these changes will provide a small boost that'll help make him a lot better without making him too broken. With that cover, let's finally wrap up this video, shall we? With that, we've covered everything about Weeping Clown and all of my opinions on him. A survivor who takes some time getting used to, but can be a really good survivor in the right hands. I was already on the fence on whether to pick him up or not. However, thanks to this journey, he's definitely joined my roster as one of my new mains. That's all the time I have for today. The next character analysis won't take as long to complete, don't worry. I played the other characters during my Weeping Clown grind, so I have the footage ready. With that said, the next video will be about the Goatman since his test server is coming up, so look forward to that. Until then, thank you so much for watching and I will see all of you next time.